Most people think a heist is like what you see in the movies. There's a guy with a hacking device, someone hanging from the ceiling, and a big shout out at the end. It's not. Real crime is boring until the exact second it becomes terrifying. Look at this shot. This is Dubai 2007, the Wafi Mall. This store is protected by some of the most expensive security on the planet. And yet, these guys drove 2 cars through the front window like they were pulling into their own garage. They were inside for 170 seconds. That's less time than it takes to boil an egg. They walked out with $3 million in diamonds, and honestly, the police didn't even know which way they went. This wasn't a robbery, it was a surgical strike, and the people who did it, they aren't your typical street thugs, they're ghosts. You have to understand the why here. Most gangs are just people who grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, but the Pink Panthers, they're different. They came out of the collapse of Yugoslavia in the 90s. Imagine, you are a highly trained special forces soldier. You've seen the worst of a civil war. Then the war ends, your country doesn't exist anymore, and you're sitting there with no job, but you know exactly how to handle explosives, how to bypass sensors, and how to stay dead calm while people are screaming. What do you think they are going to do? They are going to go where the money is. See, in the 90s, the Balkans were a mess. These guys were members of units like the Tigers or the Scorpions. They were the elite. When the fighting stopped, they were discarded. They went back to cities like Belgrade and the Centinje and found out that their military pensions wouldn't even cover a pack of cigarettes. They had the skills to take down a government, but they couldn't buy a loaf of bread. So they didn't start a gang, they started a franchise. There's no big boss in Volcanic Lair, it's a network. A cell in Montenegro calls a driver in Belgrade and scout in Paris. They use military compartmentalization. If one guy gets caught, he can't snitch, because he literally doesn't know who the other guys are. They treat the world's luxury boutiques like enemy outposts. They aren't stealing, they are extracting. If you want to know who we are dealing with, you have to look at the names the police eventually managed to put on the case. These aren't just guys, these are the architects of the method. For example, take Dragan Mikić. To Interpol he was a ghost. To the Panthers, he was a legend. Mikić was the man who perfected the high-speed exit. In 2003, he was caught in France and was sent to one of the best French prisons. Most people stay in prison, but not Mikić. 2 years later, while his associates distracted the guards by firing AK-47s at the prison walls from the outside, Mikić literally scaled a wall and vanished. He went straight back to work. Then there's Milan Lipoja. He was the guy who ran the Tokyo hit. Lipoja wasn't a muscle-bound thug, he was a tactician. He was known for his calm. He could sit in a cafe across a target for 8 hours, drinking a single cup of coffee, just watching the way the shadows moved across the security cameras. He was the one who realized that social camouflage was more powerful than a bulletproof vest. And you can't talk about the Panthers without mentioning Olivera Ćirković. Yes, a woman. She was a professional basketball player in Yugoslavia before she became the brain of the Panthers logistics. She was tall, glamorous, and spoke multiple languages. She was the one who could walk into a boutique in Greece or Paris, look a jeweler in the eye, and map the entire security system while he was trying to sell her a watch. She wrote a book called The Pink Panther. She didn't hide from the life, she defined it. Finally, there's Duško Martinović. He was the veteran. The man who understood that the heist isn't over when you leave the store. It's over when the diamonds are cut and the money is laundered. He was the one who managed the diamond pipeline. These people weren't working for a boss, they were working for each other. Here's the thing that really gets me. The hit is the easy part. These guys spend 6 months, sometimes a year, just watching. They don't just scope a place, they live it. They'll rent an apartment across the street, they'll time the guards' bathroom breaks. There's a story from a heist in London where they actually painted a park bench near the store just before the robbery. Why, you may ask? Because they knew if a witness sat down to watch them, they get wet paint on their clothes, panic and be too distracted to remember the license plate. They even sent women weeks before, dressed like billionaires, just to look at the hinges on the display cases. They aren't looking at the jewels. They're looking for the panic buttons. They're looking for the blind spots in the CCTV. They know the safe is weak before the manager even knows it's being targeted. They use something called a clean skin. This is a local person with a perfect record who rents the getaway cars and the apartments in their own name. The Panthers never leave a paper trail. By the time the police finds the lease, the person on it knows nothing, and the Panthers are already across the border. That's not crime, that's psychological warfare. If you want to see how this works in real life, look at Tokyo 2004. The target was that Comtesse de Vendôme necklace. It was worth around $30 million. Tokyo is one of the most monitored cities on earth. Most criminals won't go near it. But the Panthers, led by Liepoja, found the one exploit in the system: politeness. In Tokyo, everyone is in a rush, and many people wear surgical masks for health. It's a cultural norm. So the Panthers warned them. They spent weeks timing the police patrols. They realized that if you walk calmly into a crowd wearing a mask, you become invisible. On the day of the hit, they didn't use guns. They used pepper spray. It was quiet and efficient. They smashed the cases, took the necklace, and walked out. They didn't run. If you run in Tokyo, people look. If you walk, you're just another citizen. They were on a flight to Paris before the police even finished the initial report. They didn't defeat the security with a hack. They defeated it by understanding the culture better than the people who lived there. Then you have the 2008 Paris heist, Harry Winston, $108 million. This is the largest heist in French history. 4 men walked into the store, and the guards didn't even flinch. Why? Because the men were dressed as a woman. Long blonde wigs, heavy makeup, designer dresses. Security guards are trained to look for suspicious men with aggressive body language. By dressing as a woman, the Panthers bypassed the guards' mental threat detection. They walked right past the security check. Once inside, they pulled out revolvers from their handbags. They knew the names of the staff. They knew where the secret safes are. This wasn't a guess, they had intelligence. They cleaned out the store in 15 minutes and escaped on motorcycles. People always ask, what do they do with the diamonds? You can't just walk into a pawn shop with a $10 million stone. The Panthers have a supply chain that would make a Fortune 500 company jealous. Within 48 hours of a heist, the jewels are in a cutter lab in Antwerp or Zurich. These are professional gemologists who work for the network. They take a famous diamond and they murder its identity. They use laser saws to cut it into 4 or 5 smaller generic stones. They lose 30% of the weight, but they gain 100% of anonymity. Those stones are then given fake pedigrees, forged documents that say they were mined in Africa years ago. The money flows back to the Balkans. It buys apartment buildings, it pays for a neighbor's heart surgery. In cities like Centinea, you don't snitch on the man who just paid for the town's new hospital wing. The community becomes the final layer of the firewall. You can't arrest a ghost when the entire neighborhood is standing in front of his door. For 20 years they were untouchable, but the world changed. Technology caught up. In the late 2000s, Interpol launched Project Pink Panther. They started sharing DNA databases across borders. Suddenly, a cigarette butt left at a crime scene in Tokyo matched the DNA sample from a bar fight in Belgrade years later. A discarded water bottle in Switzerland matched a skin cell found on a wig in Paris. The ghosts finally got names. Liepoja was eventually caught. Martinovic was eventually caught, but even then they showed their military roots. In court, they don't talk, they don't snitch, they take the 15-year sentence, they go to prison, and they wait. They know the network will take care of their families. It's a soldier pact. In their world, you don't trade your brothers for a shorter sentence, you take the hit and you stay silent. Interpol has a whole task force just for these guys. They arrested hundreds of them, but it doesn't matter. The Pink Panther isn't a person, it's a method. Every time my cell goes down, a new one pops up using the same blueprint. And the money, like I said, it doesn't go to Ferraris, it goes back to their home villages in the Balkans. It builds schools, it pays for surgeries. To the police they are the Pink Panthers, to the people back home they are Robin Hood. That's why nobody talks. The original Panthers are getting older now. Many are dead, many are high security cells, but the method they created is still out there. They proved that no amount of AI surveillance or biometric locks can defeat a man who is willing to spend 6 months watching a door. So next time you see a jewelry store with those big, thick glass windows and the unbreakable locks, just remember, somewhere someone is sitting in a cafe across the street with a stopwatch, and they aren't worried about the locks, they are just waiting for their 3-minute window. In his mind, he isn't a criminal, he's a soldier on a long-term deployment. The mission didn't end, it just went dark. Stay vigilant.